When you work in the VIP casino industry, some customers make you feel special. They invite you to dinners. They try to give you gifts, depending on where you're at, whether you can accept them or not. They treat you like a close friend. Sometimes they tell some of their most intimate secrets. But everything can change when you say no to them. And that's when you learn what the relationship really was. Hey guys, welcome back to the channel Behind the Lights with DK. Today I want to talk about a very important topic that's actually personal to me, just because it's something that when I used to manage VIP, I try to instill in a lot of my staff. So when you're in the VIP world, you can really get overwhelmed by the bright lights, the fine dining, the various events that you go to, concerts, even meet and greets. I had the privilege one day of meeting one of my childhood fans, Jerry Lewis. One of his last shows in one of the venues that I worked at, he managed to get an autographed picture. It was amazing, but obviously the people that went there, they were really appreciative because they were big fans of Jerry Lewis as well. He was a lot older and obviously well past his prime, and I know he does have some history, but to each his own. I enjoyed his humor growing up. 12 o'clock on a Sunday. So VIP, so you could be going out to fine dining restaurants, you could have dinners with your clients, and then over time you start developing what appears to be a relationship. Now, bear in mind, from an employee perspective, from a host or player development host or whatever you want to call them, your job is to ensure customer service is at the highest level for these people. Now, remembering a lot of these people, especially at the top end of a portfolio, they're spending a lot of money, so they're expecting the best service possible. So one of the ways to do that is you get to know them quite intimately. You know them, their families' birthdays, what their likes are and what their dislikes. So you'll tend to offer them things. You tend to offer them things that are within the realm of your budget and what is allowed. Now, over time, the customer, whether it's instinctually or not, they'll think that you're becoming their friend. They'll develop a relationship with you. So some will genuinely reach out and want to know you better and become a so-called friend. There are others where that friendship is not necessarily on purpose false, but it's very transactional. So as any business, you have your highs and lows, and at some point with those customers, they'll get to a point where for whatever reason, they're not visiting as much, maybe they're bored, maybe something's going on in their lives that is preventing them from spending what they used to spend, and that's fine, that's their life. But then you have to say no to something. So maybe their favorite concert is coming up, and you just have to say no. And this is where the real test of the relationship starts, because from an employee perspective, you have to learn how to say no while still maintaining a relationship. However, sometimes on the other end, they may get offended, upset. And the biggest risk that any staff has is the customer will start to raise complaints about their host. There's a lot of levels to this, but so you've said no to the customer retaliates by complaining about you, trying to get you into trouble, trying to force managers into giving them something because you said no. Now, flip side of that is the management has to understand what industry we're in. And yes, the manager has to try and maintain that relationship also with the customer to a degree, but also don't throw your staff under the bus. You want the staff to maintain a portfolio, to generate revenue, but at the same time, if the customer is not performing at where we'd hope them to be, and then the host is determined from their portfolio that it has to be cut back, management need to understand that. Now, managers should never respond straight away to a customer, right? So the customer rings up and says, hey, Phil, DK, I've got a complaint about him. He's not providing service. He's not giving me attention. He's not doing this, that, and the other. At any point, the manager should not respond straight away. The manager should only say, Phil, sorry to hear about that. I take on board what you're saying. Let me go talk to DK. Let's see what's going on. If a manager at any time says, oh, look, I'm sorry to hear, Phil. Yep, you know that show you wanted. Let me get you 2 tickets for that, whatever, da, 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 da. That is a bad move from a manager, because the manager should have clear, defined understanding of what's going on. There's an element of trust in your staff, but at the same time, you need to make sure that the right business decision was made. Now, once that is out of the way, we talk about the staff. Now, the staff, why is it bad to cross that line between customer sort of friends? When you're focused purely on your business portfolio, you're treating that relationship transactional, which is fine. You can be polite, courteous, understanding, empathetic, all that sort of stuff. But in the back of your mind is you are representing your business. Now, what tends to happen in VIP, we've had a couple of drinks, we've had a lot of dinners, we've had some shows together, we have similar interests. So then, whether it's conscious or unconscious, you start creating biases. Now, those biases can make or break a host and make or break a business. Because if you're being swayed by your customer's friendship, it's compromising your integrity from a business perspective. So at any time, regardless of how genuine the friendship is, you are representing a business. Your integrity must never be broken. You must never break your integrity. If you see something, you say something. What tends to happen is over time, you start building relationship and something small happens. You try and make an excuse for it in your mind. You're thinking that's fine. There's probably a reason for it. And that starts to escalate where you're now not even looking at the long hours they're spending here, or the wife that's been complaining, or the husband that's been complaining they're spending too much. You tend to block things out because you have these biases. He'll be fine. He's been with me for a long time. You make excuses, and that should not happen. Let me sort of stipulate, we're not talking breaches of integrity or bribery or corruption like a Hollywood movie. There's no envelopes of cash. There's no these big bribes or anything like that. I'm sure it has happened historically, but what I'm talking about is not that. What I'm talking about is compromise of integrity for the misjudgment of a relationship versus the business that you're running. But where the corruption can stem, not the envelope with cash, but what can happen is, let me buy you dinner, or here's a voucher, or here's something. Now, most places in Australia, at least, they don't allow you to accept gifts. And if they do, generally they're quite small in value. Anything higher has to be declared or handed in. And I'll get to another point on that one. It's a bit tough one to deal with. So what tends to happen is a small gesture happens, and then so you kind of feel obligated, well, I'll do a small favor back. Something happens, and then you give them the benefit of the doubt because they were so generous to you. And what happens is it always starts off with a crack, but that crack, if left unattended, starts to get worse and worse, and to the point where you're now really compromised. You're giving away things you shouldn't be, and then you're compromising yourself, the customer, and the business. And that is a bad no-no. I have heard stories historically, I have no evidence of this, but just sort of third party. Staff would use vouchers to gain favor with certain people, but not only customers, but with other third parties to try and give them preferential treatment when they were looking after their customers. Now, that is just wrong. That is completely wrong. Not only is it a breach of integrity, but it's a breach of trust. It's against policy. It's illegal. There's so many things. That's basically theft. You're basically stealing from the company for your own gain. And there's no way in this world that is justified. What else is there? Well, there's also depending on the clients that you have as well, right? So the managers need there to make sure that the guardrails are there, the staff. Now, a lot of people used to tell me in the early days, and I say this every opportunity I can. A lot of people say, oh, we're in VIP, we work in a grey area. Well, I say bullshit to that. Sorry, I'm just going to call it out. I say that's bullshit. To work in a grey area, you need to understand what is black and what is white. Without black and white, you cannot make grey. And what do I mean by that? You can work in the grey area, but you need to know what your boundaries are. Once you understand what your boundaries are, then you work ethically within that, always with integrity. I'll use that word a lot because integrity for me is the highest value any employee can have. So once you know what your black and white boundaries are, then you can work in that grey. You never overstep. You never assume the business wants this, so I'm going to do this. You are not the CEO. You are not the owners. You are not your manager. You do not cross those lines ever. I've seen people historically fired for crossing that line. Never a good thing, never a good view. And is your career really worth a small sacrifice or a small breach? It's just not worth it. So how do you overcome this? So from the very early onset, you need to understand that communication with your customer is clear, professional. I'm here for you. I'm here to provide a service to you. I want to make your stay with us as best as possible. But at times, I will have to say no. You just tell them up front. You say, look, I will always do what is in my power, help you to get what you want, but I need you to understand that there will be times it's just not possible. Hopefully we understand each other, and hopefully that doesn't affect our relationships in the future, but you play it out. Now, the words I'm using are probably just ridiculous, but you find the word, you need to understand your customer, you need to understand where they come from. There's so many things to understand. And the biggest one, and this is I was going to touch earlier on, the biggest one is the whole gift side of things. So there are certain cultures that if you deny a gift that they're giving you, that is an insult to them. And this is a really hard part, right? Because we do have the black and white that says you're not allowed to receive any gifts. That's fine. But by not receiving or not accepting a gift, you're also insulting the customer. So that's a little bit difficult. So what can you do in that instance? You can potentially accept the gift, but you make it clear to your manager. You take it straight to your manager. You don't hide it. You don't try and do anything with it. You say, I'll accept it and I will have to pass it to my manager. I may not receive it. I'm letting you know. I will pass it on to them. Once you tell them that, the customer generally will say, well, don't worry about it. I'll take it back, but I thank you very much for being honest with me. And you move on. I've seen historically, years and years ago, I've seen people accept gifts, and it was well known that certain gifts would go through to management and certain gifts would stay behind. Now, in today's world, I firmly believe you see something, you say something, and that would always be brought to the attention. Historically, there wasn't that much of a push in regards to see something, say something sort of mentality. I'm glad that the casino industry has caught up. I'm still fully aware you're running a business and it has to be a balance between the two. But as long as you're maintaining integrity and again, following those black and white rules, you should be okay. So the casino industry, especially in the VIP, it can be jarring for some. That's what I was going to say earlier on. Almost forgot. One of the biggest traps within VIP, depending where you are, depending on your position, country, all that sort of stuff, there is an element of we have these VVIPs, not gamblers necessarily, celebrities. And this is the biggest trap, because if you are the go-to person for these types of people, celebrities, whatever the case may be, you start believing yourself that you're part of their world, and you're not. Realistically, you're a paycheck away from getting turfed. You need to be careful with that. So when you have VVIPs come in, celebrities, singers, whatever they are, you need to understand that you are representing the business. Yes, you're making sure they're having a fun time. However, you do not cross that line. You do not share information. You do not compromise yourself. And the word no still exists. Maybe a little bit more flexible in terms of maybe I've got to get my manager's approval instead of a flat no. But no is in your vocabulary, even with celebrities. Now, that's what makes or breaks a good host. A good host will either don't know how to say no without losing a customer, and a great host can say no while still smiling and make the customer understand. So takeaway is integrity is a must. Do not get blinded by the bright lights, hence why I call behind the lights. And always communicate to your managers. Don't let anyone ever tell you, oh, it's okay, or don't worry about it, or next time. Stick to your guns, be true to yourself, be the highest integrity possible within the VIP space, and you'll succeed in this career. All right, guys, if you have any questions, you want to know a little bit more, whatever I've spoken about, maybe I didn't make something clear, or maybe you have a specific topic, you let me know in the comments below. Click that button, tick the bell. I hope to have these every few days come out with different topics. I may branch from all the way back when I was in food and beverage. I may talk about my time in financial crime, the things I am allowed to talk about. But if you have any questions, there, let me know. And remember, peace, love, all that stuff. Take care. Bye for now, guys.